tocarte, pero no me atrevo a textearte. Tú solo bailas en mi mente, mi amor. No hay nadie más con que prefiera bailar, aguanta y baila como fuego, iluminamos el cielo con nuestro amor. Aguanta y baila siempre. Baby, quiero nadar en tus palmas, no necesito sombra ni paraguas. Mi amor, me gusta cuando estamos ahí, botella como será calentita. Y no tengo mucho que perder, yo aguanta para mí. Yo te enseño, baby, todo lo que te mereces, mami. No hay nadie más con que prefiera bailar, aguanta y bailar. Cuando agarro tu cuerpo nunca lo suelto, encima de mi baby siempre te siento, siempre te siento. No hay nadie más con que prefiera bailar, aguanta y baila como fuego, iluminamos el cielo con nuestro amor. Aguanta y baila siempre. Y ya llegó el momento de dejarte. Siempre me duele cuando estamos aparte. Nos pasamos muy bien juntos. Dejemos nuestra huella y punto. Estoy loco por tocarte, pero no me atrevo a textarte. Tú solo bailas en mi mente, mi amor. No hay nadie más con que prefiera bailar, aguanta y baila como fuego, iluminamos el cielo con nuestro amor. Aguanta y baila siempre. Y ya llegó el momento de dejarte. Siempre me duele cuando estamos aparte. Nos pasamos muy bien juntos. Dejemos nuestra huella y punto. Clarito, para siempre.
Hey everyone, how's everyone doing? Shout out to everyone in the chat. Fun to be Blonde is here, our mod and our member. Hope everyone's having a great start of the week. If your week started yesterday or today, depending on the holiday, well, shout out to you, and I hope that you guys have a wonderful start of the week. So was sitting here. Oh, look at so infamous Sylvia. Happy birthday! I meant to message you, by the way. Shout out to you. I need to make sure I have your information in the description box. Infamous Sylvia had messaged me and letting me know about what's going on with Mr. Robert Kelly in that situation. Now, I know, okay, and to be fair, I am just going to be very transparent with everyone here. I shy away. I initially shied away about R. Kelly. I'd done videos here and there about R. Kelly, okay? Because it's such a controversial topic. It's also a topic that tends to divide a lot of people, right? But I don't shy away from challenges. So if you are a supporter of R. Kelly, you're totally welcome here. And if you're not, that's okay as well. What we want to do is remain respectful in our chat, which is why I put the disclaimer up with, I'm like, why did I write it in all caps? Because I feel like all caps and it's almost like I'm yelling at people. That's not at all what I'm intending to do. Please don't take it that way. But as adults, I think it's important for us to have a really good conversation about this motion, about what's going on, because number one, these are social issues that are huge, right? That what's happening, and not so much because R. Kelly and his history and as a celebrity and all that other stuff, but Anybody can find themselves in a position in which you're being charged, and maybe the charges don't necessarily fit the bill. Now, I have not made my conclusion yet. I'm going to look at things, and I'm going to kind of go about it this way, right? So I'm very, like I said, I've been very hesitant to talk about R. Kelly because I never really know, where everybody lands. But at the same time, I wouldn't be true to myself if I didn't challenge myself in this. If I didn't say, I'm going to talk about R. Kelly, I'm going to talk about this motion. Shout out to Infamous Sylvia, who messaged me this information and the updates to what's going on with Mr. R. Kelly. Okay. What we're going to do, all right, and what I tend to do a lot with the legal documents and stuff like that, before we really dig into it. See, my brain, the way it works is I like to split things. I'm a visual person, okay? And so I like to show what I'm reviewing. I like to talk about it, and I like to take it slow. This specific and let me make sure I got everything with me here. But this specific motion, okay? So motion for a judgment of acquittal. Jennifer Bourdain, okay, Bourjean, that's how you say her. Yeah, Jennifer Bourjean. There's no R in her name. This specific motion, guys, it is very it's a really well written motion. Okay. Um, the lady is a pro. She knows exactly how and what she's going to do here. Okay, because I'm telling you, it has me questioning what happened in the trial. And I know Infamous Sylvia attended some of those hearings as well. So she could probably, I'm going to make sure that everybody goes to her channel and gets as many updates as possible. But it does put into question the government, okay, the prosecution side as to how this trial happened. And this trial was only about 5 or 6 months ago. So I read it, and I had 2 attachments. And what I'm going to do, just to give you guys just a heads up, I'm going to make this a 2-parter. Okay. What we're going to do, and I'm looking at the table of contents. What you see in yellow, okay, this is the argument. The government failed to prove defendant guilty of the offense of racketeering count 1. And it's splitting A through F. Okay, we're going to stop at F because I want to get into the patterns of racketeering on a separate video because it deals more so on the alleged victim side. Okay, so what I want to do is go through go through number 1, A through E, and we'll stop at F. Okay, and we're going to just come back and do another video. We'll do another live on F. So that way, hey, we're taking our time. I got my water. I'm ready to go. And you guys are here for it, okay? Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, good job, facility, passing the information on. That's absolutely right. We have to give our shout out to Infamous Sylvia, who allowed us to review this information. Thank you so much. She's been following this case for quite some time. All right. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand. Whether you're for R. Kelly or not, we are all adults. We need to be respectful. Okay, we're not dragging. We're not anything like that. I expect that if you're in my house, which you're in my channel, this is my house. Okay, I would never allow 2 people to fight in my house. So you're welcome to my house. Take your shoes off, watch TV, eat some food, but let's get along. Okay, and I hope that we can all agree to that as well. I like the conversational piece. So why don't we start by this? Okay, so this motion was submitted on February the 17th. Okay, so not that long ago. I believe that was a Thursday. Okay, and if you guys don't know who Jennifer Bonjean is, excuse me, she's actually one that was very a shaker and the mover in the Bill Cosby case. Okay, so it's her office, it's her advocacy that was able to kind of get those things going for Bill Cosby, and that's why we're seeing him where he's at release. She's actually really good at finding prosecute like these little things that we might overlook, right, as far as how the law applies to a situation versus you broke the law. She's able to really get into these details, and that's what she's showing us here, okay? And we're going to honor that. I'm also going to show you guys, I'll show you guys 2 pictures that I pulled because you guys are going to see these words a lot. And these are just legal definitions that I was able to pull because I don't want us to get confused. Pretty straightforward. A lot of people don't understand what RICO enterprise, because we're going to hear that here. So again, that under the Racketeering Influence and Corruption Organization Act, an individual, partnership, corporation, association, or other legal entities, and any union or group of individuals associated. In fact, uh, the attorney Jennifer is saying that this RICO enterprise, this right here, this Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organizations Act, does not apply in the R. Kelly case. We're going to see her thought and her reasoning logically why she believes that that's the case. Okay, another one we're going to hear is the Mann Act. And that is a popular name for a federal statute, okay, which was first enacted in the 1910s. Excuse me, 10. That criminalizes the transportation in interstate commerce of a person for the purpose of prostitution or another prohibited sexual activity. She's also going to make the argument, she's made the argument in this motion that the Mann Act does not apply to R. Kelly. Another thing, and this is just saying, if you don't know what an acquittal means, it's a judgment which declares the person innocent of the defendant. Yeah, so this would be R. Kelly's innocent, okay, of everything, right? So just heads up. And I wanted to make sure I provided this information so that it's easy, so you guys can see that. Go ahead and do a Google search it. I actually pulled this from a legal reference, legal resource for you guys to kind of review that on your own. There are elements, always keep that in mind. There are elements that need to be met under these definitions, right? Under a RICO enterprise, under the Mann Act, under, all this other stuff that we're going to talk about. So it's not just like R. Kelly's free. It's going to be a process that's going to happen in order for that to happen. Okay. So let's go down. And you guys know I do my little Google thing, right? I highlighted the arguments. The government failed to prove defendant guilty of the offense of racketeering. Count 1. We'll review A through E. And then the other argument is that the government failed to prove 2 counts through 9 of the indictments. Okay, and then we'll review those at a separate video as well. Table of authorities. These are just cases that the attorney is referencing. She literally referenced, I want to say, over 50 plus cases to make her argument. I mean, I'm telling you, this was so very well written that I'm like, oh my God, you know what? Statutes, other authorities, penal codes, and everything to make the argument as to why this motion should be granted, right? Yeah. She wishes she used her talents to help free innocent people. R. Kelly deserves IMO. Yeah, it's a lot of information, right? So let's go. I highlighted where we're going to talk a little bit about and where we'll start, okay? Like I said, we're not going to go through every piece of it because it's so dense. But the introduction is pretty simple. They cite a case, and then they say that that this specific, right, that the RICO, the statute, is broadly worded in order to prevent loopholes from being drilled into ingenious lawyers. Okay. There's a danger of it being applied to situations absurdly remote from the concerns of the statute's framers. Such is the case here, where the government misused both the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organization statutes, RICO, okay, and the Mann Act in a manner never previously conceived or carried out. So what is she saying here is that this is a first, okay? That they misused, they meaning the government, misused the RICO Act and applied it to Mr. Robert Kelly's situation. I wanted to highlight this and start right here because I think that this is well, first of all, it's the introduction to this argument, the crux. Okay, so this is huge. And in there, it goes into how high-profile men in the government brought RICO prosecution against the defendant that was absurdly remote from the drafter's intent. So the intention of the RICO Act was never just to prosecute people they couldn't prosecute. This is what Jennifer, the attorney, has been saying, that this specific charge was maladapted to this situation. It did not apply to Mr. Robert Kelly. This is her argument. Adding to its history of celebrity, Mann Act prosecutes the government's extended the broad language of the Mann Act to conduct it never intended to remedy. While the Mann Act may be an effective tool for combating human trafficking, it was not designed to punish sexual misconduct like the allege against defense. Excuse me, why can't I read? Defendant. Like that alleged against the defendant. Sorry about that. Make sure I got my water too. All right. Where defendants alleged transportation of females, largely consenting adults, was incidental to his travels as a world-renowned performer, he is not guilty of the Mann Act violations. If the government intended to prosecute Mann Act violations in the fashion that it did here, it might consider investigating the influential, wealthy, mostly white corporate leaders who frequently arranged travel for paramours who later conclude that the experience was less than pleasant. You know what this reminds me of? And I'll tell you guys. The guy, what's his name? The one that was traveling basically and making sure that he was bringing young girls to the islands. Does anybody remember the Jeffrey? What's his last name? Somebody give me a last name on this guy. So he was kind of, he had his wife, I believe was his wife, and she was the one that was kind of courting everybody, scooping people out. I mean, she was basically the ringleader of that situation, bringing young girls to the islands and making sure that they were groomed and then setting them up with different men. Yeah, and they were high. Thank you. See, I knew the name. Jeffrey Epstein. Thank you very much, guys. Jeffrey Epstein, okay? That's a huge thing. So in this argument, right, saying that, hey, it doesn't apply here, okay? And she's saying you're going to have to convict everyone else, even those that participated in it, right? So you got to think about all these big names that have been pulled out, okay? Think of Bill Clinton, Trump, all these people that have been said to have been involved in the Epstein ring, okay? This is what it's saying. This is a ring, a prostitution ring. This is what R. Kelly was being accused of or is accused of, right? A detached and unemotional review of the evidence in this case shows that the government presented an overabundance of bad character evidence to compensate for its insufficient proof of the specific elements of RICO and the Mann Act. Accordingly, this court must acquit defendant of the verdicts of guilty entered against him. Whew. That's right. She is not. She's just sharing the blame and trying to normal. Well, but see, that's the thing is, I don't know what she's sharing or if it's blame. I think what she's trying to say is, look, the government applied these charges, but do they really apply? And that is what Jennifer Bonjean does. This is what she did in the other case with Bill Cosby. She said, you know what? Does this really apply? Does this law, okay, does this conviction, does it really apply to this situation? Has the state or has the prosecution, the government, have they presented sufficient evidence to show that? That is what she's trying to say, and this is why she's opening up the argument. This is why she's telling you, detach yourself and look at the evidence. Give this an unemotional review. That's what she's saying. Check it. Does it check the boxes for this? Because otherwise, you're going to have to go back and convict all these other white men as well that have participated in it. That's really what she wrote that up there. So she takes us to the relevant facts. And the relevant facts is going to be just kind of like a review of the case, right? Of what has happened and what we know to be true. The government, charged defendant with 1 count of racketeering based on 14 predicated acts and 8 standalone counts of violations of the Mann Act that were also charged as racketeering acts. With the exception of the Racketeering Act 1, alleging that the offense of the bribery, the charged offenses involve conduct alleged by 5 women. And they named the women's there, both by Jane Doe and by name. So we have Geronda Jane Doe 5, Jane Doe 5, Stephanie Jane Doe 2, Sonia Jane Doe 3, and Faith Jane Doe 6. Okay? The jury returned a verdict convicting defendant of all charge counts, but acquitted him of those racketeering acts related to Sonia. Given the length of the record, defendant will incorporate relevant facts into the argument sections as appropriate. Okay. And so then she does that. So she starts with the argument. To sustain a conviction, the jury must have been able to find each of the essential elements of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, so you guys got to remember this. In RICO and all this other stuff and any charges, right? In a criminal case, you have to make sure that all elements are met. So in the RICO enterprise, every element has to be met. Okay, which means that the government has to show that there was a organized act. Okay, individuals, partnerships, corporations, associations, other legal entities, and any unions and groups of individuals associated. So you're going to have to make sure that all the elements fall into this RICO Act, which is what Jennifer is saying did not happen in this case. And we're going to look at that a little bit, okay? So here we go. To sustain a conviction, the jury must be able to find each of the essential elements of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. As said in details below, defendant Rico's conviction cannot stand where the government failed to prove the existence of an enterprise, the activities of which affected interstate commerce, and a pattern of racketeering activity. Moreover, insufficient evidence existed to prove each and every element of the charged Mann Act violation by proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The Mann Act, remember that? So it is criminalizes the transportation in interstate commerce of a person for the purposes of prostitution or another prohibited sexual activity, which means that in order to convict Mr. Kelly, you had to make sure that that it actually applied for prostitution, sexual activity, that there was people there that were acting upon that women were being transported for this specific reason, for this quote unquote enterprise, right? Yep. I'm looking at your guys' comments. So moving on, where it starts, the government failed to prove defendant guilty of the offense of racketeering, count 1. I'm going to show you guys a picture, okay? Because this is going to be a very important picture to look at. So this is a court TV little screenshot, okay? This is what it looked like when the government went up there and tried to say that this was the alleged enterprise. You have R. Kelly here, and then you have what looks to be mugshots of people that were quote unquote involved, okay? I'm looking at this picture, okay? And I can only imagine that, and I've sat in jury trials and I've sat in jury, I've sat there. I would imagine if somebody tells me, let's say that the prosecution says, you know what? This is the enterprise. R. Kelly's the main guy right here with the big picture. And here are his workers. Does this picture really tell me anything about how this enterprise worked? Do I have any clue as to who is the person? Who's the person bringing the women to R. Kelly? What does this picture really tell me? All it says is members of R. Kelly's alleged enterprise. So this is what is said to have been shown during the trial. A picture of R. Kelly with a bunch of different mugshots around there. And they call this an enterprise. I want to know the argument as to what made it an enterprise. Who did what? What did they do? Who was in charge of bringing the girls? Who paid for the flights? Okay, and this was a sex trafficking. So how much was paid? Who paid for what? Right? Because there's got to be money. Who did what exactly what versus just a bunch of mugshots? This is what was shown. Thank you. The picture does not say anything. It is opening a huge can of worms. Absolutely. I would have to agree. But Like I said, because this can happen to just about anybody. It just happened to happen to Mr. This situation right here can happen to anybody. Anybody can accuse you of this. And if they showed this picture and said, you know, you are in charge, you're convicted because this is your enterprise, and this doesn't tell me anything. This doesn't tell me anything. It says that there's a lot of connections to people. And this is exactly what the attorney is saying happened during this trial. The court must acquit defendant of the offense of racketeering where the government failed to prove defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of each and every element of the offense. Remember, there's different elements for the Mann Act. There's different elements for RICO. Keep that in mind, okay? The government effectively swamped the jury with bad character evidence that was guaranteed to produce a guilty verdict. But its proof on the charge offenses were insufficient as a matter of law. Ignoring the distinctly economic legislative history of the RICO statute, the government brought a RICO prosecution against defendant not to remedy widespread criminal activity of an enterprise, but to punish one man whose alleged crimes could no longer be prosecuted by the state and local agencies. This is where Jennifer's saying they misused the RICO. They misused the RICO on Mr. R. Kelly because they couldn't just charge him locally or by state. So they put all these bad characters to charge him. Okay? Yeah, thank you so much, right? So, moving on forward, the government belated interest in protecting defendants' alleged victims does not justify application of the RICO statute to the alleged private sexual misconduct of the defendant, and only the defendant, even if some of the conduct could have been timely prosecuted by authorities long ago. So what she's saying is, listen, if my client misbehaved, if my client violated, what the government is trying to do right now is that they're now trying to put this charge on him to make up for the fact that they couldn't charge him before. Okay? And that is a misuse of a RICO. So, I mean, does she make a point there? What do you guys think? Let me give it to you this way. If you get a traffic ticket, officer decides, you know what, you ran the red light, but really you should have gotten a parking ticket. Should you get, like, it's almost like giving you two different, I'm gonna give you ran the red light, but really I meant to give you a parking ticket because you parallel parked a little crazy over there. That's that's what she's saying. It's like you cannot just put a blanket on this charge and say that this is what he did. Right? Oh, you think so? She's exposing the elite while trying to protect what? Oh, I don't know if she's trying to see, I don't know about that. And that's the thing is, for me, it's like everybody gets labeled as the elite. There's a lot of elites out there. I don't know if that plays a role into this. I'm just saying. Now, mind you, I'm not. I can get into conspiracy theories, although it's not my favorite thing, especially when I'm like looking at what seems to be the argument right now. But just saying. Just saying. Anyways, okay. So, as a reminder, RICO's primary purpose was to combat organized crime by prosecuting the highly diversified acts of a single organized crime enterprise under RICO's umbrella. The overarching goal of the statute was to curb the infiltration of legitimate business organizations by racketeers. What do you guys think? That is the purpose of the RICO, right? To curb the infiltration of legitimate businesses, organizations by racketeers. Okay. We go in here, we get a definition from what Congress finds to be the statute. It breaks a little bit more. We're not going to get into that too much. Feel free to check it out. Admittedly, prosecutors have used RICO in a wide variety of circumstances under the statute's liberal constructions clause. Okay, and they give it a little clause number where we can search that information as well. The government clearly exceeded those limits with this prosecution, as evidenced by its failure to prove the charged offenses of racketeering. Okay. To sustain a conviction of RICO, the government must prove that the defendant, here's your elements, through the commission of two or more acts constituting a pattern of racketeering activities. Okay. Number two, directly or indirectly invested in, maintained an interest in, or participated in an enterprise. Number three, the activities of which affected interstate or foreign commerce. As set out below, the government offered insufficient proof of all elements of the offense of racketeering. These are your elements right here. She's saying two or more acts, a pattern of racketeering, two or more acts that would show racketeering. Okay? Indirectly or directly invested in and maintained an interest in participating in the enterprise. So R. Kelly would have had to have shown indirectly or directly that he participated in whatever enterprise was set out. Okay? And that it affected interstate or foreign commerce. And this is what Jennifer Bonjean is saying. No, it didn't. Didn't happen that way. Crazy. So we go to A, an enterprise, and then it breaks it down for us. It includes an individual, partnership, corporation, association, or other legal entity, and any union of group of individuals associated, in fact, although not a legal entity. Okay, so remember our legal definition right here as to racketeering. Okay, keep that in mind. Corporations, associations, or other legal entities. Okay, so very close to it as well, if you're wanting to reference. Okay, and she's saying that the government did not prove, it didn't establish an enterprise. There was no enterprise for Mr. R. Kelly. This is the argument. She's using those legal authorities to cite them, okay, to make sure that we understand what an enterprise is and or looks like. The enterprise is neither the individual defendant nor the pattern of racketeering activities. Rather, it is an entity separate and apart from the pattern of activity in which is engaged and must be alleged and proved separately. However, there must be a nexus between the enterprise and the racketeering activity that is being conducted. Okay? What nexus did they prove? That's what she's saying. She's not, she's creating and saying that there's doubt in here in this conviction based on how RICO, based on how an enterprise would look like, based on this definition. Okay? Furthermore, the RICO enterprise must have been an assertable structure separate and distinct from the pattern of racketeering activities. They give us another authority source. And finally, for the purposes, the person charged with the RICO violation and the alleged enterprise must be separate and distinct from one another. This requires flow from the statutory mandate that a person who engaged in a pattern of racketeering activity must be employed by or associated with the enterprise. So, remember that picture that we showed? They're saying that here's your alleged enterprise. What did they show? What did they prove to show that they were employed by Mr. R. Kelly? This is where she's saying we don't have enough information for that. We don't have enough information for that. It's a little interesting, right? Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. And I have another device going just to make sure I can see all the comments. Hey, Detroit, thank you so much for being here. I haven't seen you in a while. Hope you're doing well. Shout out to everyone in the chat. If I haven't greeted you, I do apologize. Let's go to common purpose, which is another thing that the attorney is saying they failed to prove. Okay. According to the government, the purpose of the enterprise was to, 1, promote defendant's music and his brand. Okay. That's the enterprise. 2, recruit women and girls to engage in illegal sexual activity with the defendant. 3, produce pornography, including child pornography. The government did not allege that the enterprise constituted a legal entity, but rather an association of individuals. Okay. Thus, for the government to establish an enterprise here, it was required to prove that the defendant, his employees, and entourage came together with the common purpose of recruiting women and girls to engage in illegal sexual activities and produce pornography, not merely the broader purpose of promoting defendant's music or brand. Assuming the defendant's employees and entourage did share a common objective of promoting defendant's music, and objective had no nexus to the underlying racketeering activities. Okay. So if we go back, the government, being the prosecution, right? They said that the purpose of this enterprise was to promote the defendant's music and his brand, recruit women and girls to engage in illegal sexual activity with the defendant, produce pornography, including child pornography. The government did not allege that the enterprise constituted a legal entity. Okay. But rather an association of individuals. So, if we look at this picture, the confusion is this. Was this the enterprise or just a bunch of associates of R. Kelly? Right? That's where we would need to look a little bit more. And how many or who was this child pornography being distributed to, right? What is going on? Who's getting paid what? Were these helpers, were they all connected? Did they all work together for this enterprise in addition to promoting the music? Okay, this is what they're saying. Okay. Recruit women and girls to engage in legal sexual activity with the defendant. Okay. It's a lot. It's a lot. So let's keep it going. Thus, for the government to establish an enterprise here, it was required to prove that the defendant, his employees, and entourage came together with the common purpose of recruiting women and girls to engage in illegal sexual activity and produce pornography, not merely the broader purpose of promoting the defendant's music or brand. Okay. I mean, that makes sense, right? Because we're talking about the Mann Act. They would need to prove that they were all working together, besides just promoting his music. Assuming defendant's employees and entourage did share a common objective of promoting defendant's music, that objective had no nexus to the underlying racketeering activities. Defendant did not go through all the trouble of becoming a world famous R&B singer for the purposes of engaging in illegal sexual activity. I mean, what do you guys think about that? I would have to agree with that. Did he become R. Kelly to engage in sexual activity or to become a singer? That's a fair statement, I would think, right? Even if his job puts him in proximity to women. The government cannot, in the government cannot and run the common purpose requirement by identifying a broad objective of the enterprise unrelated to any fraudulent activity with no nexus to the racketeering activity. Defendants' employees and entourage share the common purpose of recruiting women to engage in illegal sexual activity with defendant that included created pornography. So what she's saying here is that the government's evidence of an enterprise was insufficient because it failed to establish that the defendant's employees and entourage share the common purpose of recruiting women to engage in illegal sexual activity with defendant that included creating pornography. It's one thing to say we're all here to promote his music. It's another thing to say we're creating pornography and we're recruiting women for it. That's the differentiation. This is why Jennifer is saying we have to take the emotional aspect. Unfortunately, for the purposes of reviewing this, you would have to take the emotional aspect because all the stories that have been said are very traumatizing and triggering. I get that. But if you remove that and apply the law to how it's written, did the government, did the prosecution meet the burden? Was it a very hasty conviction? And that's the question that we all have to kind of wonder and ponder and ask. Right? Just a thought. Just a thought-provoking thought, okay? Just a thought. Let me take a drink of water here. That being said, all right. Whew. Let's see. Notably, the government does not define illegal sexual activity, but based on the predicate's acts charged. The government contends that defendants' employees and entourage shared an objective of ensuring that defendant had his sexual needs met by women, some, but not all, underage women, while at home and while traveling, was able to control these women to engage in sexual conduct the government deems abusive, was able to videotape his sexual activities with these women, and could expose his sexual partners to herpes. To be clear, the government contends that making sure the defendant's sexual needs were met was the objective of the enterprise, in addition to promoting his music and brand. Okay, so what I'm hearing here is this. What I'm hearing here is this, is that based on what the government's saying, that the defendant's employees and entourage, they shared the objective, okay, they all shared this common goal to ensure that R. Kelly had his sexual needs met by women. Not all of them were underage, some, but not all underage, while at home and while traveling, was able to control the women to engage in sexual conduct the government deems abusive, was able to tape his sexual activities with these women, and could expose his partners to herpes. Okay, to be clear, government contends that making sure the defendant's sexual needs were met was the objective of the enterprise. That is what the government say, that, okay, his needs were primary, in addition to promoting his music and his brand. It is a very sticky situation. It's a very sticky situation. However, the record is devoid of evidence that the members of the enterprise acted with the common objective of ensuring that the defendant engaged in illegal sexual activity. Okay. Interesting. But where the government's evidence of an enterprise centers on its claim that the associated, in fact, members shared a common purpose of ensuring defendants' illegal sexual activities. The government must offer some evidence that the members of the enterprise knew that their actions were promoting not just legal sexual activities, but illegal sexual activities and the production of pornography. And that's what Jennifer's saying did not happen in this case. Okay? You're going to have to show where the promotion of these activities was happening, legal and illegal. Right? I know. But does the legitimacy, and that's a great question. And that's what Jennifer, the attorney, is saying. It's like, you can't, you're putting, it's like apples and oranges. Does this RICO charge, does this fit for Mr. Robert Kelly? We don't know. We don't know. We don't think so. This is saying it doesn't fit. This was kind of like a hasty decision to hurry up and charge him because they couldn't do it at the local and state level. So they slapped this on him. This is what his attorney is saying. This is why she put this motion into acquit. She's making an interesting argument, though. I will say that. It's a very interesting argument to make. So, but where the government evidence of an enterprise centers on its claim that the associated fact, and we read that a little bit here, put in terms expressed in satin, where the government was required to show that the individuals who made up the enterprise shared a common purpose to engage in a fraudulent course of conduct. To share a purpose requires the members to agree on that purpose. That's the piece. Did they all agree? Did they all agree to the illegal and legal activity? Okay? The alleged legal and legal activity. Did they all agree that they were going to be underage girls? Did this enterprise, did they all say, yes, we agree? Did they feed a machine? And if so, what was the end product of it? So, interesting argument, okay? The government came up short on evidence that all of the defendants' employees who made up this vague enterprise were working as a continuing unit to ensure defendants could engage not just in sex, but illegal sex. She's saying this was a vague argument. Which, by the way, then it makes me wonder, well, why couldn't his attorney see through that? I mean, like I said, every attorney has a special skill set. They're going to argue. They're going to find loopholes. Maybe there's some things that they're better at than others. But this would be something that your attorney would have to see. Like, what are you bringing to show? You got to poke holes. So I'm just saying, right? Like, I'm not quite understanding why this wasn't an argument before. Or maybe it was, and it was very poorly done. I'm not really sure. But it sounds like, based on what Jennifer is saying here, like, it's going to be more than a picture with people's mugshots in there to show that this is an enterprise. You're going to have to produce the evidence. You're going to have to show that not only was it the sex legal, but illegal. I don't know. So, no employee testified that she understood that their purpose in the enterprise was to recruit underage women. Nor did any member of the enterprise present any testimony that they had any knowledge that defendant's herpes diagnosis, that he practiced unsafe sex, or that he videotaped his sexual experiences. The government can point to no evidence that any employee possessed specific information about what precisely transpired in defendant's bedroom once he was alone with his female guests. even if defendant's employee knew that the defendant expected his guest to follow strict, even controlling rules and possess recording devices like iPads and iPhones, it does not follow that the members of the enterprise shared a goal of promoting illegal sexual activity. There you go. Does it follow? What do they show? What do they have to show for it? See, this is a tricky, this is the question. What did they show outside of, like, what evidence did they have? What testimony? I mean, I guess the testimony could be good, but what concrete evidence did they have to show anything? That they were promoting illegal sexual activities. Now, I do remember, okay, let me play devil's advocate here. I do remember that there was a post about, not a post, I'm sorry. I think it was Geronda who said something to the effect of, she had told him that she was underage at one point, and that he had told her, he meaning R. Kelly, told her to lie about her age. I do remember that. But outside of that, what else do we have to show? Did everybody know that Geronda was underage at that time? And I'm only using her because I do remember that specific vivid statement. And had the enterprise known that she was underage, I mean, if they're working all together, allegedly they're all in enterprise. Did anybody else hear that? I mean, it brings a good point in argument. Okay. Just a thought. Just a thought. All right, let's keep it going. So, let's see. Enterprise distinct from racketeering activities. Okay. To the extent the government argues that its evidence shows that the members of the enterprise shared a common purpose and had knowledge of promoting the defendant's illegal sexual conduct, the government has failed to demonstrate that the purpose of the enterprise was distinct from the racketeering activities. So instead of putting all these things together, they have to be distinct, right? The defendant was distinct from the enterprise. So this was a requirement based on, again, going back to our definitions that we posted, you're going to have to show distinctness. Okay? The United States Supreme Court has held that a RICO defendant must have participated in the conduct of enterprises fair, not just his own affairs. Okay? The government cannot plead its way around the distinctiveness requirement by simply alleging that the enterprise is defendant's inner circle. Remember? The inner circle. So the government's going to have to show more than this. And introduce a series of headshots. And this is where the headshots came in here, right? Where it said that the government cannot plead its way around the distinctiveness required by simply alleging that the enterprise is defendant's inner circle, and introduce a series of headshots of all the defendant's former employees as evidence of an enterprise. This is what they were referring to. This is what they were referring to, guys. The enterprise, as alleged by the government, existed because of its goal to promote the defendant in his legal and alleged illegal sexual activities. It had no function unrelated to the defendant. Under this factual pattern, the distinctiveness requirement was not satisfied. So past employees cannot just be part of the enterprise. Like you cannot say that. You're going to have to show more than that. Because the government's RICO prosecution under this fact pattern is entirely unique, there is a factual there's a factual similarity authority on this issue. Sorry about that. That said, I lost my spot for a minute. Guidance offered in factually dissimilar cases leads to the clear conclusion that the government failed to prove an enterprise distinct from the defendant. Okay. Interesting. And as it keeps going, like I said, I highlighted parts that I was like, all right, this is going to make sense to kind of highlight and go through. Applying the rules of the foregoing cases, the government failed to prove an enterprise distinct from the defendant by alleging a RICO enterprise that consists of defendant and his own employee agents carrying on his affairs, namely promoting his brand, his music, and his sexual needs. The government failed to satisfy the distinctiveness requirement. But differently, because the government alleged that defendant's employees associated together for no purpose other than to carry out defendant's needs, including his illegal sexual activity. The employees did not form an enterprise distinct from the defendants. Defendants and the alleged enterprise were one in the same. So, failure to prove distinctiveness between enterprise and the employees. It's not enough to say that we're all working here. Okay, you're gonna have to show for it. The employees did not form a enterprise distinct from defendant. So, how does this land for everybody? And I'm just kind of checking in and making sure everybody's doing okay because we've been in here for about an hour. It's a lot, very well written, very dense. This is why I was like, let me highlight some areas. Some of this is like, wow, it's a lot. It's a lot, right? It's a lot to consume, a lot to say. Let me look at some of these comments. Yeah. You think, okay, so you think it's a lot of wordplay? I mean, it might be, Deetra. It might land that way, but I think part of it too is that, she's doing her job. She's making the argument like the government did not prove what they said to have proven. They have to, acquit him. That's what she's going to do. And she's very good at pointing out maybe where the law applies and where it doesn't. My thing is this is did anybody know some of this, how the law apply, how RICO applies, how the Mann Act applies at the time of his trial? Like, were his attorneys inadequate in that or ill-equipped to deal with that? I'm curious to know how this is going to end up for him. And as we go to E, and remember, we're going to stop at F, okay? The government failed to prove that so-called enterprise activities affected interstate commerce. Okay, this is a big one. To sustain a conviction of racketeering, the government must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the alleged racketeering activity affected interstate commerce. The United States Supreme Court has determined that an enterprise is engaged in commerce when it is directly engaged in the production, distribution, or acquisition of goods or services in interstate commerce. Okay, we have the definition there from the authority, one of the researching legal authorities. However, consistent with the liberal construction clause of the RICO Act, some courts have held that the racketeering activity of the enterprise need only have a de minimum, okay, and that is a Latin, and we can look into this a little bit more, effect on interstate commerce. This court instructed this jury consistent with the view that the government need only prove that beyond a reasonable doubt that the enterprise had minimal effect, okay, de minimum, minimal effect on interstate commerce. This court further instructed the jury that it is not necessary for the government to prove that the individual racketeering acts themselves affected interstate or foreign commerce. Rather, it is the enterprise and its activities considered in their entirety that must be shown to have had the effect. No source was provided for this specific statement of law. This is very important because I think that this is very confusing to a lot of people. So when you're in the jury, okay, they tell you certain things like pay attention to this, pay attention to that. Um, this does it's very ill explained, especially if you're not an attorney, as to how maybe one thing applies to the other. So I can see somebody kind of sitting there and be like, well, what is the de minimum effect on interstate commerce? And then the court's going to jump in and instruct you. This jury, okay, the view of what that means only proved that beyond a reasonable doubt that the enterprise had a minimal effect on interstate commerce. Right? So I can see that being just like, well, what the hell? Do we know, how does that apply? And they're saying here, no source was provided for the specific statement of the law. Thank you. It talks baby girl. She says RICO defines an enterprise as any individual corporation. Yep. And I did put the definition up here. Thank you for sharing that. We looked at that under the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, an individual, partnerships, corporation, association, or other legal entities, and any union or group of individuals associated with the fact. We also put the Mann Act up there and acquittal definition. So thank you so much for sharing that. Absolutely. A plaintiff must allege and prove that the existence of two distinct entities, and that's where the word entities, distinct entities, comes in. A person and two, an enterprise. That is not, why did the comment cut off? Sorry about that. That is not simply the same person referred to by a different name. And that is what the attorney is saying when we were talking about distinct entities. Moving forward, and let's see where it stops. So we are at F right here. I'm going to stop us right here, okay, because it's a lot. And like I said, I'm going to go back a little bit and review if there's anything else that we can put for our next video on this one. It's just a lot of information, guys. And I appreciate it, but some of it I'm like, well, what is more simple? What is more easily explained, right? And it could be easily interpreted for everyone because it's a lot. Yeah. Yeah. What do you guys think? So where is everybody at in their head? And I'm just thinking, right? Like if the judge looks at this motion and says, okay, sure, let's grant it. Like I'm just thinking out loud, right? Not to say that's what's going to happen, but I mean, it could. Where do you guys land with this? How do you guys feel about this? I'm curious to know what everybody's thoughts are on that matter. Out of curiosity. Anybody? Feel free to drop a comment about it because it's a lot. It's a lot of information. It's a lot to consume and think about. And that's why when I was reading it, and it took me a couple days to kind of really consume it. I said, man, but she makes a good point. Was this the enterprise? Was this the picture that was shown? And how did they make that argument? And if they made that argument, what about his attorneys? Did they do anything to dispel any of this information? Or was this really, driven by emotion versus facts? And that's what she is saying at her intro of this motion. Everybody's driven by emotion here. They're not really looking at the facts. Can we take that out? Which is a fair statement. I don't know. And so then Deidre says, so it sounds like wordplay now. That is not going to get him off. I mean, right? It's different. So, and I really appreciate everybody coming here and just, first of all, I don't think we've had to block anybody. So thank you so much for being respectful. I mean, I'm always kind of, like I said, when I was looking at this, I said, I don't know, but we'll see how everybody handles the information, reviews it, and feels if they feel anything different or where they're at in their head or in their mind. So shout out to everyone in the chat. Shout out to everyone that was respectful and handled themselves. Shout out to our mods that are in here as well, and to our members. We have It Talks Baby Girl Do the Right Thing that stopped by. Let's see, who else? Let me make sure I shout out my members here as well. Fun to Be Blonde was here earlier. Dukes was here as well. I mean, everybody was kind of like all over the place, but I think we totally handle it pretty well, I would say, for the most part. The distinctiveness doctrine requires a plaintiff to demonstrate that each RICO person is legally separated from the RICO enterprise. Yeah, we definitely caught that on. And in showing the chart, they were a unit that operated separately. Right. What you mean, this one right here? It Talks Baby Girl. This one right here. And I think that was the argument that the attorney's now making, saying that that's not the case of what happened here. That this is how they showed their enterprise, the alleged enterprise. So now they're gonna poke holes and argue against that. Show. Okay, I see what you're saying. I got you. The octopus. And here comes troll. Shout out to our member, the octopus chart. Gotcha. Well, thank you so much, guys, for stopping by. I know this was a lot. Thank you for being patient. And then you got somebody here that makes a really funny comment. Stop. I mean, we never know what's going to happen here. I'm curious to know. I mean, who knows? Right? So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for allowing me to reschedule, because I was not feeling very well. And I haven't been feeling very well lately. So thank you guys for allowing me to push back and move things around. We're going to come back with a part 2 on the victim. Let's see. And I'm looking at the breakdown real quick. That would be from F, that the government's proof did not establish a pattern of racketeering. And so then again, it does show. Let me move this picture out of the way. Here we go. This is it right here. The government's proof did not establish a pattern of racketeering. Racketeering 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, she went in there and she really broke it down. Look at that. So, and then her last argument, that the government failed to prove counts 2 through 9 of the indictment. And then her conclusion. And we just have to break it down, because otherwise we would be here for several hours to just kind of see how it all goes. Right. Where are my manners? Let me hit that. Yeah, thank you. Hit that like button. Thank you. For sure. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm curious to see how it all works out. Me too, Queen. I really do. We'll see how this all works out, guys. Who knows? But I will tell you this. There's a lot of people out there that are reading it and they're saying he's going to get out. And, and we'll see kind of how it all goes, right? For me, I like to look at things and review things independently before I make up my mind. I will say, though, that motion was very dense. And, I mean, this lady's not playing. She's doing her job, first of all, right, as his attorney. So we'll see how it all goes down. Anyways, you guys, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I am out. I got to take a little break. I got to drink some water because now my throat is dry. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Tuesday. Shout out to all of our members and everyone in the chat. Thanks, guys. Rabbits out.